I didn't know that there was a connection between my brain and my heart.
Oh, there's a definite connection between your brain and heart. But high-level beta is when you're fearful, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're jealous, whatever. It's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. Now the heart is the creative center, right? It's the part of our biology that allows the brain to begin, the frontal lobe to begin to create.
Check, check one, check, check.
You talked earlier on about brain-heart coherence. It's a term that I've not heard before. I didn't know that there was a connection between my brain and my heart.
Oh, there's a definite connection between your brain and heart. Yeah. So we were so fascinated. This was February of 2020. I'll never forget it. We started when we were doing our electroencephalograms, our brain studies. We put a cardiac lead from the heart to the machine, and we started looking at HRV in comparison to brain waves. And coherence is rhythm, right? So when waves are kind of moving in rhythm like this, you can see that on the brain scan, right? They're very orderly. They're they're rhythmic like that. So if you think of waves that are coherent, being very orderly and being very rhythmic, when they're out of order, like choppy, and they're on different parts of the brain or on different rhythms, that's when the brain's incoherent, right? And so when we started looking at training people how to broaden their awareness to sense space, when you're sensing space, the act of sensing and feeling causes you to stop analyzing and thinking. And if you're not analyzing and thinking, you start suppressing neocortical activity. Your brainwaves start to slow down. In beta, you're aware that you're a body local in space and time. That's low-level beta. Like we're talking right now, we're in low-level beta. If I said, Stephen, I'm going to give you a quiz, and you're going to have to take the quiz in front of your audience, and you would kind of perk up a little bit. Your brain would get a little bit more aroused, and the light bulb would get a little brighter, and you'd move into mid-range beta. That's like when you're going to give a speech, or you're at a dinner and you don't know people. You kind of be a little bit more aware.
Just for people that can't see this, because they might be listening on audio.
So beta is conscious awareness. Now, in beta, the brain is trying to create meaning between what's going on in the outer world and what's going on in the inner world, and it's processing all the sensory information. So a lot of data. So beta is like conscious and awake. And so there's low-level beta, there's mid-range beta. It's not on this chart. But high-level beta is when you're fearful, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're jealous, whatever. People get switched on in these high levels of beta, and that's when we get over-focused. You ever been under stress and you start over-focusing? That's because you're narrowing your focus and you're over-focusing, and that's kind of a brain state. And so when you broaden your awareness and you, instead of narrow your focus on something physical or material, that's what the stress hormones do. But if you broaden your awareness and you sense space, and this act of sensing causes you to no longer analyze and think, and your brainwaves start to move into alpha. Now in alpha, which is this brainwave, it's a slower brainwave state. That's the creative state of the brain. The brain sees more in pictures, more in images. It's more imaginary, right? In beta, there's a voice talking to you in the back of your head all the time saying, this is right and this is wrong. You got this to do, you got that to do. That's the critic kind of in our brain. When you get beyond beta brainwaves and you move into alpha, you start opening the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, we're not just looking for any type of alpha, but we're looking for coherent alpha. So we want all those compartments that were firing in different rhythms and different frequencies, all of a sudden start doing this. So now the whole entire brain starts moving into what's called global coherence. Now, when the brain starts synchronizing like that, what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain, and the whole brain starts to fire as one neurological network, and that's what our data shows. Now, that's not the end. That's just when you're moving into an imaginary state, and people do this, but a lot of people move into alpha, but it's not coherent. So we're looking for coherent alpha. Now, many of the people that are meditating really well, they can relax their body so well, and they can feel so safe that their body moves into a light rest or a light sleep while they're still awake. So it's relaxed and awake. In that realm, you're in a hypnotic state. You're in theta brainwaves. And in theta now, lights are shut out in the thinking neocortex that plugs us into three-dimensional reality. The identity's gone. The character is gone. There's no activity there. Now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information, and now we're suggestible to information. And now we're in the operating system. We can get in the subconscious mind and rewrite a program. We could rehearse a new script. We can tell a new story. Instead of the story of the past, we can tell the story of our future, and we can program our subconscious mind and our autonomic nervous system to begin to change our biology. Now, go too far past theta and you fall into delta, and now lights are out. You're in a catatonic state and you're unconscious, right? Mm-hmm. And so we kind of do this when we go to bed at night. We go from beta to alpha, theta to delta. And if you're under stress and you're in high beta, you can't sleep. Mm. And you can't sleep because you're thinking, right? And you can't drop through brainwaves. And we wake up in the morning and go from delta to theta to alpha to beta, right? So there's 2 times that the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opens up. Okay, what does this have to do with brain and heart coherence? Well, in theta, when a person is in that state where their attention is on their heart and energy is in their heart, it's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. Now the heart is the creative center, right? It's the part of our biology that allows the brain to begin, the frontal lobe to begin to create. So you get the heart and the brain kind of working together. The more relaxed you get in your heart, the more awake you get in the brain, something beautiful happens in the brain. If the person can sustain this and they're in that theta state, theta becomes the carrier wave. And right within the brain, you start to see alpha waves building on theta waves. And then alpha waves in harmonics into beta waves, and harmonics into high beta, and then high beta ultimately into gamma. And now the person is relaxed and very awake because gamma is super consciousness. It is super awareness. So the formula of being relaxed and awake and synchronizing your heart to your brain causes the brain to move into a state of what's called resonance. And resonance is when you have waves on top of waves, harmonics. And the brain starts functioning in a more resonant state. Sometimes even people have delta as the base, carrying theta, and theta carrying alpha, and alpha carrying beta to high beta to gamma. And they're all waves within waves. And as those waves come together, if they're coherent, they interfere and create a bigger wave. And then those waves come together and they interfere and they create bigger waves. And that's exactly how the energy in the brain goes up. So we have brain scans of people whose gamma brain waves are 200, 300, 400 standard deviations outside of normal. And I'm going to give you an idea. 3 standard deviations outside of normal is 2% of the population. So they're processing an enormous amount of energy in their brain. And it feels really good, really good. So we practice a lot synchronizing the heart to the brain.
If you do like MDMA or something, does that put you into some of these brainwaves? I'm wondering if any psychedelics are inducing of these states.
We're going to do a comparative study actually this year with psychedelics and meditation. I can answer that question more definitively. What we do know from fMRI studies with psilocybin is that the default mode network in the brain, the one I was talking about earlier, that's always the brain's predictor, that shuts off with psilocybin, and that's exactly what we see in our advanced meditators and our fMRIs, that those people that are having a mystical experience right in the MRI looks like they're taking psilocybin. The same exact brain circuits are turned off.
On this theta wave, you were talking about how that's really where a lot of the reprogramming can happen. So do I need to be in that state and then be exposed to some kind of stimulus sound?
Ooh, good question. Good question. Well, I'll answer it in 3 ways. First way is when you're conscious in your subconscious mind and you're trained to imagine whatever it is that you want, you're going to begin to signal your autonomic nervous system to start manufacturing chemicals equal to your intention. In other words, the intention of whatever you're thinking about acts as information that begins to change your biology. So theta is a great way to open up the door. We also use theta when we want to program people, because it's a hypnotic state, to a mystical experience. And if they're in that state, remember, when you're suggestible, you accept, believe, and surrender to information as if it's the truth without analyzing it. And that's what programs people's biology, right? So you can program somebody into believing they need a drug, and you can program somebody into believing in just about anything, but you could also program them for a mystical experience, and that's what we do. Now, so we can do that by giving them information when they're in that hypnotic state. They're very suggestible, but we're only going to do it in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And then the third way is something that we really discovered that we weren't expecting. Let's see how I can say this and make it simple. There's particle and wave. There's matter and energy. And so if all of your attention is on this three-dimensional world, you're unaware of energy. So have a person close their eyes and take their attention off of everything physical, everything material, everything known, and go from a narrow focus to a broadened focus. And as they sense the space, they're actually putting their attention on that invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses, the quantum field, right? And that field is carrying an enormous amount of information. So when a person moves into theta, and I ask them to open their awareness, if they're in a certain range of theta, we can just about predict 100% of the time that that person is going to connect to information. Now, not information coming from their senses, like a hypnotist could put you in a trance in theta and give you suggestions and could program you. But you're still in the same state, that hypnotic state, but your eyes are closed. There's music playing in the background. You're not eating, you're not tasting, you're not smelling, you're not feeling with your body, but you're still suggestible to information. There's only one other place you can find information, and that's frequency. And frequency carries information. So when a person starts to connect to energy, to frequency, and the thinking neocortex is dialed down, the moment they connect to that energy and frequency, the brain goes into these very, very high states of gamma brainwave patterns. They're connecting to a greater level of energy, a greater level of order, and the arousal that's felt when they have this connection, which is normally typically fear or anger or pain, the arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is bliss. They say, I don't have the words to describe the feeling that I just had, right? So they're dipping closer to source. They're dipping closer to a greater energy and frequency, and it's being reflected in their biology. When we see people move into these elegant states of high gamma, it's primarily in their autonomic nervous system. It's very fast, and it's very coherent. Now, if stress is autonomic dysregulation, and they're functioning in a very, very high energetic state in their autonomic nervous system, coherent gamma brainwaves, then there's an enormous amount of autonomic regulation. And the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates all other systems. Now watch out, because now the tuning fork is sending information to every cell and tissue and organ in the body. And when people move into these states, many times when they come back, they get a biological upgrade. Somehow energy starts to inform matter, and the whole body is lifted by light, lifted by frequency. When we draw the blood from people who have these kind of moments, we look for information in the blood. There's information in the blood that we've discovered that stops the COVID virus from entering the cell. We've isolated the protein that inhibits the virus from entering the cell. In other words, we've done these studies called adoptive transfers. We've taken advanced meditators' blood and we've put it in a culture with ACE2 receptors, so cells that have ACE2 receptors, and then expose the ACE2 receptor to a pseudovirus, like a COVID virus. And in advanced meditators, we noticed that the virus couldn't enter the cell. It was stuck to the outside of the cell, and we isolated a protein in the advanced meditator's blood that inhibits the virus from entering the cell. Those people that have those transcendental moments, as I said, 84% of them have information in their blood that causes the mitochondrial function and glycolytic function in cancer cells to shut off. There's information in the blood for neurogenesis, for the microbiome, completely changed at the end of 7 days, completely different microbiome, without changing their diet at all. They're still eating the same food, but they're not the same person, right? There's some kind of change that creates a lot of probiotic microbes.
I remember reading a study of Wim Hof, the Iceman, where they injected him with a virus. And I think they injected other people with the virus. And through his breath work and meditations and whatever else he did, the virus didn't infect him, but it infected the other people. And then I think in the study, he trained other people to be able to reject the virus as well. And all of this kind of sounds a little bit woo-woo to the average person, because to think that you can do something to prevent a virus infecting you, I mean, it blows the doors open to like personal responsibility and
yes, of course,
which is troubling for people, I think.
Yeah. Well, we published the paper. It got published in a scientific journal. People can see it online. Well, if you keep practicing being greater than your environment, you'll be greater than your environment. That's just how it is. In other words, if your response to your environment doesn't weaken you but strengthens you, then the innate intelligence of your body will have an intelligence that will cause you to be greater than your environment, right down to the microbe.